So for our attendees, everybody joining us, welcome to the first session of the 35th annual UCA convention. We will begin the convention on November 11th in Columbus, but we're beginning today with a pre-convention virtual session to help set the tone for the conference. And today our panel is focused on urban superintendents. The year's theme for the conference is emerging stronger, reuniting to advance educational leadership. This session and our upcoming conference is really an opportunity for all of us to join together after an unprecedented time of isolation and loss. We've watched how well-documented opportunity gaps have grown amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We know our communities, schools, universities, and each of our own lives have been affected. The pandemic, though, has really reminded us that both leadership and research matter. We need leaders who are willing to coordinate efforts and push our organizations forward during difficult times. And we also need research to understand and respond to complex problems and inform practice. So today, at this moment, we have an opportunity to come together as researchers and educational leaders to discuss the future of public education. And I'm personally excited that we're raising the voices of superintendents in our field because they're in a pivotal position to improve schools and advance equity. They also have a unique vantage point within their communities. They can see both the opportunities and the challenges that lay ahead. For the doctoral students who are joining us, I hope you're thinking about how your programs of study and your future research can be informed by our panelists because your work is going to shape the field in the future. So with that said, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Paul Cruz, the person who's responsible for planning and facilitating this conversation. Dr. Paul Cruz is a professor of practice and the co-director of the Cooperative Superintendency Program at the University of Texas at Austin. He is also uniquely qualified to facilitate this conversation given his role and his prior experience. So before joining us at UT, Dr. Cruz served as the superintendent of Austin ISD from 2014 to 2020. He's also served as a teacher, a campus administrator, and the deputy commissioner of the Texas Education Agency. I'm lucky enough to work with Dr. Cruz each day, and I'm grateful that he joined the UCA planning team this year. Paul really cares about the field of educational leadership, the problems of practice confronted by leaders, and ensuring that the leadership pipeline is robust so that we can continue to improve public education for all children. So Paul, thank you so much for your leadership and your help, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. DeMatthews. So when you, Dr. DeMatthews is actually he's been a practitioner as well, is now in the world of academia and doing exceptionally well. And when he asked me to sort of help on this front, he said, let's really get the voice of the practitioners, because while we have to study the work that's going on, let's talk to people who are actually doing the work. And let's talk to the superintendents, because when we're thinking through this, there's a lot of complexity going on, a lot of uncertainty. And so I started to think about, let me just call on some folks, and he had one of the best of the best. And that's what you have before you. And I'm just really excited because they truly are amazing. I have a lot of respect for them as professionals, as superintendents, and as individuals, because the ethic of caring is so strong in their value system. So with that, I will begin introducing our panelists. Ed Graff is the superintendent of Minneapolis Public Schools, which serves and enrolls over 35,000 students. Previously, he served as the superintendent of the Anchorage School District, one of the nation's 100th largest school districts. Mr. Graff is dedicated to doing what is best for all students collectively while still meeting the needs of each individual. Throughout Mr. Graff's 25 years as an educator, the best interest of students has always been at the forefront and has remained a priority. And making sure that all students have an enriching school experience along with the support needed to reach his or her potential. He has led implementation of the Anchorage School District's comprehensive strategic plan, expanded district-wide differentiated learning opportunities, increased preschool and literacy efforts, facilitated collaboration with more than 600 business partners, and provided proven supervision and accountability for student instruction and business management. Mr. Graff has served on several boards and professional organizations. In 2016, he was presented the Exemplary Social Emotional Learning Award from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So we're really excited to have Superintendent Graff here with us today. I'm gonna have to take a big breath before I do these bios because they truly are amazing. And you, as I read each one, you'll know why. Superintendent Dr. Barbara Jenkins has been dedicated to serving the needs of students for over 30 years. She was named Superintendent for Orange County Public Schools in 2012, which serves over 206,000 students. Under Dr. Jenkins' leadership, the district won the prestigious 2014 Broad Prize for Urban Education. The district also received the Governor Sterling Award in 2014 and 2015, and the Sustained Excellence Award in 2017 for its exemplary performance, using research-based best practices in its business. OCPS has repeatedly been recognized by the College Board for increasing access to advanced placement coursework, while simultaneously maintaining or increasing the number of students earning exam scores for college credit. Dr. Jenkins is a recognized education leader. In January 2017, she served as or received a presidential appointment as a director of the National Board of Education Services. She serves on the executive board of directors of the Council of Great City Schools, Chiefs for Change, the Wall Street Journal CEO Council, and the Florida Council of 100. She is past president of the Florida Association of District School Superintendents. In 2017, she was named the Florida Superintendent of the Year and one of 4 finalists for the national title. We're also happy to have her here because she was going to be doing some work at the White House, which in Dr. Jenkins' world, she just calls that Friday. So we're really excited that she made time for us to be part of this, conversation. Now we have Dr. Rick Lopez, who has led Garland ISD since January of 2012, which enrolls over 55,000 students. Garland ISD is also known as Garland USA. And when you get to know Rick, you'll know why. Dr. Lopez is widely recognized for his proven success in closing achievement gaps for all learners, including implementing the accelerated campus excellence model with Garland ISD. His collaborative leadership approach and belief in the power of teamwork is evidenced in the #LopezListens sessions held with GISD staff, students, and community members. Dr. Lopez was named a recipient as a TASA Inspiring Leader of 2019, which is a statewide organization for administrators and superintendents. He was also invited to participate in the Governor's Roundtable for Safety and Security in 2018. He has received numerous awards, including being named National Latino Superintendent of the Year for 2016 by the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. Dr. Lopez is a recipient of the University of Texas at Austin Recruitment Fellowship and is a graduate of the Cooperative Superintendency Program, which is a doctoral program to prepare future urban school superintendents. So hook 'em horns. So with that, we're ready for our questions. And I know everybody's not from Texas, but in UT is we do hook 'em horns. I have to explain that because I think everybody's from Texas. Everybody knows that, and everybody doesn't. So with that, we have a few questions. We also have the session's being recorded. So while it's being recorded live today, we're also going to have that available for other participants who weren't able to enjoy this conversation this morning at this time. And so we will also have questions from audience members. So the first question, working through this pandemic has been challenging for all of us. What were some of the most significant lessons learned from this experience? And so I will open it up and let's see who would like to go first, but I'd like to, if each one would comment on it.
I'm happy to go first because Dr. Cruz, we learned so many things during the pandemic. To consider it's been 100 years since this country has gone through anything as traumatic. I think we learned some significant things around digital learning. Orange County had been on a pathway for one-to-one devices and digital platforms for our children as an additional tool in our classroom, but to convert everyone to digital learning taught us quite a bit, especially around the support needed for our underserved populations. We would be fooling ourselves if we thought everything went smoothly. It was not smooth, especially for those children who did not have additional support at home. We provided hotspots so they had connectivity, but they just didn't have the same support at home as some of our other children may have had, those who are in the lower socioeconomic status. I think we also learned that on a positive note, that communicating with parents is essential in a crisis, and repeated communication. We have to say things over and over again, and social media is by far the most efficient way to get information out to our families. But it has to be repeated, it has to be in short chunks and short segments. And social media is always a preferred venue for our parents. And then I think we have to admit at the end of the day, we had some significant concerns around what was lost, unfinished learning for some of our children who absolutely need to be in those face-to-face settings, not just children who come from home struggling with financial issues, but also for our ELL, those who are learning to speak English, and for our students with exceptionality needs. They needed to be in face-to-face atmospheres more than any other. Bright outcome is we learned that we can do some flexible scheduling and make that work for our young people, especially our high schools. We want to continue that flexibility.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins, because you're right. There's things that we learned that maybe continue towards implementation, because it's serving students in different ways, and it was just a better approach. But it was challenging. It still is challenging. So
yeah,
how about we have yes, Ed.
Yeah, I would certainly say that we, as mentioned already, we learned a lot. You know, one of the things for me that was really reinforced is the importance and significance of public education. You know, our public schools not only serve as a backbone for the education and academics, but what we found in this pandemic was that we're also serving a critical role for childcare, as we had our first care responders, you know, needing those supports. We provided social services, access to nutrition, you know, serving millions of meals over the course of the pandemic, health services, mental health services, the social emotional support for many of our communities. You know, when we had to switch to distance learning and many in-person services had to stop due to COVID-19, we saw firsthand the amount of support schools had been providing in that in-person learning. And then through the transition, just the many gaps that became evident in our communities. You know, we knew they existed because we see it in our schools, but it really exacerbated that and highlighted the impact of disparities that we have. And we also learned that COVID-19 impacted every single staff member in our system, certainly some more than others, but we know that was very prevalent, from the connections they had with families, the connections they had with their students, and the connections they had to just personal members in their immediate family. We also learned how to think differently and to do things differently. And we learned how to work remotely and how to continue to develop and nurture those relationships through a screen. It also reinforced through this the importance of being in person, and why many students were becoming more disengaged the longer we were separated by a screen. You know, the students who needed us the most needed the in-person relationship. And then, of course, the whole notion of technology, it became our access point and tools for learning. We had to increase our technology IQ and become more efficient and effective employees, teachers, learners, with the tools that had existed, but we had an urgent reason to learn and adapt. And as mentioned already by my colleague, the amount of distribution of devices, or the significance of where those digital divides existed, it really came to light how just impactful those needs are. And we saw it again through our ability to try to deliver services remotely.
Thank you for that, Ed. And when you talk about the experience the student have, as you talk about the socialization piece, it's so critical for all students. And my son was a sophomore and missed his entire junior year. He was at home because of health conditions. And so it was very risky for him to go to school. I said, what are you missing the most? And it wasn't algebra. And it wasn't the content, it was his friends, the relationships. And he said, because when you're in class, you know, you're talking, there's passing time, you get to see each other, you high five, you say hello, just quick interactions. He said, now you log on and then you log off. Go get something to drink, you come back, sit down, log in and log off. And I guess I should have known that, but until he actually told me, I thought, wow, that's hard, because it was just working in real time. But the socialization piece that is so important to us as educators, it it was challenging to bring that forward. So I appreciate your mentioning that. Dr. Lopez.
Oh man, I can listen to Ed and Barbara all day and hearing them out. I'll tell you what, I was going down memory lane and in some cases I was smiling. In other cases, my eyes started twitching. So my name is Rick Lopez, proud superintendent of Garland, USA. We're in Dallas County, for those of you that aren't familiar with Texas, and we're the second largest district in Dallas County. And we're experiencing urbanization. And so we went from the Mayberry of the world to, some people call it New Jack City. And so that brings a lot of different, experiences, and I'll say rich experiences. So what did I learn, and what maybe we should have learned? First of all, I learned everybody did it right. Minneapolis, Orange County, everybody did it right. We were all in that Apollo 13 scenario with limited resources in front of us and a moment's notice, and people coming to us telling us, hey, these are the circumstances, and we did the best that we could, surrounded with some brilliant people. And so, the first thing I want everybody to understand, this isn't a time to scrutinize on what was right or wrong. It's a time to really look at the brilliance that really came out of education. I'm with it in the sense that we started seeing that education centers really were the backbone of what are getting people continually through right now, COVID-19. The second thing I saw was how polarized our communities can be. In my area, I'm about half red, half blue. And so any kind of decision, whether it deals with masks or safety procedures, in-school learning, out-of-school learning, everything else became a personalized issue. And those platforms were really seen in our social media outlets. And so it was really important for us to say, hey, man, let's get out of this COVID cloud. That COVID cloud is full of darkness and blackness, and we're not like that. Garland is not like that. So we started doing a campaign to revisit of who we are and who we want to be. Now, our district has emerged, and we are more technology proficient. We started analyzing our learning gaps. We saw that what's crazy about where we're at, I'm right in the middle of affluency all around us outside of Dallas ISD. Everybody's more affluent than us. And so it's plain for us to see with 2020 clear vision that the more affluent you are, the better off you were in education during the COVID crisis. Kids of color, kids of poverty, you name it, the ones that had least access to a lot of different things besides internet and just having a mobile device really came in the short end of the stick. And so what we now have is even a bigger calling than ever before. And so what we're trying to do is rally the troops around that calling once again. And we're seeing national teacher shortages, shortages in specialty areas such as special ed. We've learned that people now value time over money. I will share this with you. So the other day I'm watching a commercial and this person says, I want to have 2 days a week that I work. And another one says, I want my college paid for. And I'm laughing. I'm like, well, that's what I'm going through. I got teachers that say I want to work summers, but not winters. And I mean, it's a lot of weird things coming my way. So I thought it was like a spoof. No, and Amazon says, hey, we'll fit your schedule. And I'm all like, that's what we're up against. We're a traditional system, y'all. My bus drivers, my teachers, they're working 8 to 5. And what I found is that people have loved the time with family during that shelter in place that we started. And then now, as we're emerging out, we've got to evolve not only with technology and addressing learning gaps, but how we support our teachers, how we really identify the campus needs, how we're going to restructure our labor environment. So those type of innovations, I believe, are going to affect us in the near future.
Thanks so much, Rick, and for acknowledging the great work, because we pretty much had to flip the switch overnight from not continuing and coming into school. And that was a challenge. It's the hardest 7 months of my career within public schools. The superintendent was the COVID time, the hardest, and it's challenging, and it's still challenging. There's something that comes up every day, as you just mentioned.
And before COVID, I had hair like you and Ed, and so it just.
I think it fixes all of us like that, right? So I've got a nice filter on mine right now, but but the superintendency is fun, but it is challenging. So the next question I want to get to, and we're just going to go in back order. So I'm going to start off with Rick, then Ed, and then Barbara. Going back to around 2020 and that time in the experience as a country, we were faced with some real issues that many have been faced every single day, and others thought it was something that just started happening. And there are issues around social justice. So I want to ask all of you about the work that you have done. I know that the work with our state associations, the Council of Great City Schools, we would come together to talk through some of these issues. But how did you work with your specific school community to address the social justice issues that we were experiencing and also experiencing today at the local and national levels? Let me start off with Rick.
Besides joining in on advocacy platforms, for those of you that aren't familiar with ALAS, I'm the Texas president. It's the syndicate. It's called TALAS. And it's an alliance of Latino administrators and superintendents. And so, of course, we did that. So beyond that, as a school district, I feel that it starts at the top. It starts with a team of 8. I have 7 board members and myself. The board members did an equity resolution during this time to pledge to address any type of gaps that we had while we were going through it and as we emerge out. We are now looking at data differently. We went through our goal setting session and we have finalized our goals. We look at data now, not only through success rates, but proportionality and disproportionality. So those are 2 different data sequences that we look at. And we want to make sure that all our learners are achieving at high rates. And when you look at it through those lenses, and then you see the at-risk indicators that come with it, that's very telling on which parts of your population are going to thrive and not, and then, so for instance, why do we have a disproportionate amount of Black students in special education, right? Well, that's one thing. But then when you start looking at success rates in math, is there a disproportionality ratio or not? And so as we start breaking it down and having those deep conversations, it's really having us align our resources. We had a sensitive issue in our district, and in Garland, we had the Southern Colonel as one of our mascots since 1960 something, whatever it was, 65, 66, 67. And my community has been in a tug of war on whether we should ever, rebrand it. And so during COVID, we did rebrand it, and it was such a unifying event. I'm going to tell you that when I did it, so many people are like, press pause. You don't need to go down that road. It's been, let's just kick the can. And I go, no, it's time. And we had such an inclusive process with everybody involved that some of the people that never wanted to change were then the people presenting it to the board for our new brand change, which is now the Titans. And so what I saw during this time of polarity, this time of where people are moving against each other and ideals, that if you do things the right way and you take your time, people want to work with each other and live with each other in harmony. And we like I said, we call that the GISD effect. And so what we have done now is since campaigning those type of things. Now in my area, if you look at it, hit national news. CRT is a huge thing in my surrounding area. I'm not putting anybody in what we call shade or anything else, but you can look at some of the school districts that are going through that. And so we've just been very purposeful that every student's going to succeed. And we're driven by results. So when we look at it, it's not personal, it's not blaming. It's like, this is what the data says. How are we gonna reverse these trends?
Thanks for that, Rick. So Ed?
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Lopez. The idea of, taking stock or doing an analysis of where you are is really important in the decisions you make and how you move forward with it. Certainly in Minneapolis public schools, a lot of different social justice issues and context. Obviously, the killing of Mr. George Floyd at the hands of a police officer really created the racial reckoning here in the city of Minneapolis. And, you know, prior to that, we were a district in a city that was focused on social justice work, very, very much included the voice and the activism and the advocacy of our students. And when that event occurred, you know, it just continued to reinforce the importance of having that voice and lifting that voice up in our students. And so for us, what I see is that we have continually actively engaged our community members on issues that are meaningful to them. As mentioned, you know, we have some schools that have names affiliated with individuals that do not align with our values on just on equity and on how they represent our school community. So we are currently going through a number of school changes, name changes. And so that will be something that continues to happen through the engagement of our students. We also embarked on a youth participatory evaluation model and a citywide government, increasing the activity of both of those organizations, providing training and tools for our students. We also had a parent evaluation model, asking them to help assist us in collecting data and using their expertise and their networking to really bring value to the voice of populations and communities that have not been able to get access to sharing that. We currently have youth evaluation models at all of our middle and high schools, and we are expanding our citywide government to our middle schools beginning in the 23-24 school year. And our parent evaluation model, which is quite unique, it's expanded this year from a district-wide model involving 50 parents who represent different populations, our American Indian population, our African American, Hispanic, Somali, Asian American communities, to where we now have over 150 parents. And so we're seeing that these projects, the evaluation projects, have really helped us focus on needs in the district, in the schools around recruitment and retention of our teachers of color, teacher to student trust and relationship formation, as well as engaging and culturally responsive curriculum, doing a curriculum transformation. So we're adjusting the narrative, or we're addressing the absent narrative, and doing it in a way that also facilitates respectful and positive communication. We also, subsequent to, again, the killing of Mr. George Floyd, we removed school resource officers from our buildings by way of a school board resolution. So looking at how we address the safety inside our schools and outside of the classroom and our school climate. We've done what we refer to as equity, diversity, impact assessments, which is a process with 15 community-based organizations of color. They support us in examining our policies, such as our recruitment and retention of our staff of color, our placement practices. As we enroll students into our school system, there's definitely advantages and disadvantages. So taking a look at how those are impacting our families and our students. Look at our site council practices and fundraising. So just a wide variety of things that we're addressing in terms of the social justice issues, but we're doing it in the structure of our organization through our policies and through an intentional engagement and work with the voices of our students and our parent community.
Thank you, Ed. Barbara?
So a couple of things I would add. Certainly, Rick and Ed have covered such critical factors. We've had similar issues here in Orange County. I think what I would add is we've had a school justice partnership in place for the last few years that has purposely built coordination between police departments and the court system, the prosecutor's office, public defender's office, and the school district. And we purposely work on things. We're very intentional about civil citations and de-escalation training to make sure that we tamp down any agitation in the community between our youth and law enforcement. And then we've also just launched a special new magnet program similar to our ROTC programs. It is for law enforcement. And so we had our Realtors Association really saw a need to build community and positive relationships. And so they pay for the uniforms. Those young people that are a part of that magnet on Fridays, they wear their law enforcement uniforms, which are certainly not like the actual ROTC uniforms. They are nice shirts and khakis, basically. But we are very pleased with that launching, along with restorative practices that we have in our schools. How do you make sure discipline matters don't escalate into law enforcement matters? So we have restorative circles and make sure that we are monitoring disparate treatment and data that reflects children of color having more discipline matters than other children. So we're very careful, very intentional about that. We have a minority achievement office that really presses achievement matters for those children who are underserved. And sometimes the data has reflected that they should be in those AP classes and in higher level classes, and they're just overlooked sometimes, perhaps intentional, perhaps unintentionally, but we purposely model and monitor all of those areas. I think also our board put out a statement, of course. I put out a statement after the murder of George Floyd, and our board also had a diversity, equity, and inclusion resolution. And I think considering the political divide, everyone's had members of the community, sometimes outside of the community, actually visiting board meetings and bringing up matters such as CRT, and we're just very direct. CRT is a very lofty concept. It originated in law school. Most people that come and bring it up don't actually know the meaning of it. And so it's sort of being used like a dog whistle, if you will, racial dog whistle, to alert people for the coming elections, to unite certain groups for coming elections. And it's just inaccurate to bring that down to K-12. And so we're very clear, it's not in our curriculum. Here's our curriculum. Happy for you to take a look at it. We ought to just teach the truth, teach history as it occurred. You don't have to villainize anyone. You don't have to make anyone a saint. Just teach the truth is been our mantra. And so when those kind of speakers come periodically, we make sure we're very clear about what's being taught in public schools. Because I think that the greatest fear, the greatest concern, Paul, is that we will be distracted. So much else going on. We've got COVID fatigue. And then we've got CRT being brought to our doorstep where it does not belong. And the concern would be that you get so distracted, you lose focus on your core business, which is to teach children. If you give us an opportunity, we'd like to teach children how to read and how to be proficient in math. There are other things that are central to our jobs, and we just have to avoid the temptation and the draw to be distracted from that.
Thanks to all three for the comments. And I sort of, it just all really connects. I'm gonna lift up a couple of points. One is, and it's just really who y'all are as leaders. It's in your DNA. You just go there. You don't look away. You don't pretend it doesn't exist. You just went there to address the issues. And then the second thing about, so that students can find their voice, parents can find their voice, not quiet that down. It was real. Kids are feeling certain, had their own perspectives. And it's so important as us, even beginning as teachers, for students to find their voice, and then even new programming, so that students actually use that in a very powerful way, as Barbara mentioned. So I love those ideas and different perspectives, and all starting with policy and practice and addressing some of the systemic issues. But at the end of the day, it's about looking at it straight on, and then for students to find their voice. And that's just so important in education, in everything that we do. So my next question, and it's one that I get a lot, because, you know, as administrators, and we've all served on the campus and superintendencies, it's fun, it's exciting, and it's tough. And some days are even tougher than that. You know, but we always are looking towards improving our community, supporting everyone. And it comes with lots of challenges, fun things, but also challenges. But in our group with UCA, it's about then developing future leaders. It is about developing future assistant principals and administrators and superintendents. So what advice do you have for our aspiring superintendents and leaders who are now taking on new roles and or thinking about stepping into a leadership role in a public school system? And this time I was going to do this first. I didn't do this first. I should have, to give you a little warning of where I'm going to go, but I'm going to go with Ed, then Barbara, then Rick.
Gotta hit my mute button. Thank you, Paul. Well, this is certainly one I've given a lot of thought to, just because I look at the people that I support and know that, in education, there's the position you're in, and then there's perhaps the next position or the next step of your career that you may want to move to. So the first thing I will acknowledge is that we absolutely need leaders. We need leaders now more than ever. We see it, I see it in my district in our students. And I often tell people when they, we say like, well, they're our future leaders. I say they are absolutely our leaders today. That does not mean that we put the responsibility of leading on them. That means we acknowledge that they are absolutely our leaders of today. And as an organization that is a learning organization, we have to be able to hear from them, hear their voice, hear from our community. So understand that their leadership is really important. And we do need those leaders today. The leaders that we have now, have been through, as you mentioned, unprecedented times. This is unlike anything. We need leaders in our buildings. We need leaders in our classrooms. We need leaders in our district offices. We need leaders at our community councils. We need leaders in our school board. So the point of saying all of that is that this work cannot be done alone. This cannot fall on one person to lift up. It's going to take all of us. So as people are looking to the future, or the aspiring to move into a position such as a superintendent, the first thing I would say is, take time to define your purpose. Know why you want to do this work, and stay in that space for some time, because it's very easy to talk about, well, this is what I would do, or this is what I think I want to do. But just know that in the last 3 years, we've seen some of our newest and our youngest and our strongest leaders move from fatigue to exhaustion. And you have to be in a space where this is what I have to give now, and this is what I want to be able to give in the future. And the last thing I want to do is set up any new leader on a trajectory that is not sustainable for them. So I think it really does come to the space of knowing what your purpose is, and knowing what you really believe in and how you want to move that work forward.
Thank you, Ed. Rick? I'm sorry, Barbara.
Okay, I thought I was second. So a couple of things come to mind, Paul, and I so agree with Ed's admonition to future leaders. And let me say first how much I appreciate those who are listening, who are committed to this work of public education. I want to thank them for that commitment and commend them. So what I say, I don't want to frighten you or scare you off from the job, but I do think we have to be realistic about what you might be facing this day and age. But to choose this profession and to want to progress in leadership, whether it's to the district office or to the superintendent's chair, or to the principalship for that matter, wanting to lead in this day and age in public education is so commendable. So I want to thank those who are in the pipeline, because many of us are getting close to retirement. So, and we need someone to pass the baton on to. So a couple of things come to mind. The work is becoming more and more politicized among sharply divided communities. That's just a fact that you have to be willing to face, because I don't see that it's going to change in the near future. So aspiring superintendents and administrators must be certain that you're committed to those challenges. This work is simply not for the faint of heart. And that's not meant to be disparaging. That's meant to be honest with you. It is not for the faint of heart. So if you have issues that would make you reserve how much energy and how much passion you can bring to the work, it just may not be the best time for you. It's just an honest assessment of where you are in life, I think, is critical. Because it's more than likely that you might end up where either a community is divided, or a board is divided, or the system comes under attack. That's just the world that we live in, the reality that we live in right now. So a couple of things come to mind in addition to what Ed just mentioned. I think you have to be committed to focusing on what is best for students. In every decision, as you progress through your career, you go to bed in peace at night, at least go to sleep when you can sleep, with some sense of peace because you focused on what is best for students in all that you do. Secondly, I think you do have to be clear on what your non-negotiables are, your purpose, what you really stand for. You don't have to draw a line in the sand. You don't have to die on every hill, but you have to know there's a certain place that I won't go. I would have to remove myself from the actual job if I were asked to do this certain thing. There's just certain non-negotiables that I think you have to have in place that you will stand for. Thirdly, I think you have to understand the art of compromise because in leadership, you can't always, you cannot be the dictator who always has his way, but the art of facilitating discussion and helping to create compromise is a critical skill for any leader. I think that's always been the case. It's just even more critical now. You have to build relationships, you have to manage a school board who are politically elected, but you have to recognize that and acknowledge that. And you have to manage those relationships and know how to work and build compromise around various issues. And then fourthly, I would say you have to be committed to taking care of yourself. It's no secret, people in leadership positions, not just in public education, but we're aware of our colleagues in public education sometimes suffer from health issues because they're not taking care of themselves. And so I think you have to have a commitment to take care of your physical health, your mental health, and your family relationships. Nobody's tombstone is going to read that they wish they had worked more hours. Most times people have some concern about how they interacted with people that matter most to them. So take care of your family as well as you progress through your career would be my advice.
And that is excellent advice. And appreciate the comments that came forward, and also about knowing yourself. I mean, the job is the job, and it's getting more challenging. But you have to know where you stand, and people need to know that as well. And I think there's always a compromise, or there needs to be some compromise, but sometimes there isn't. And it is what it is. But that is so important about knowing yourself is so critical in leadership, especially today. So, Rick.
Well, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and so what I would say is it's a trap. It's a trap, y'all. Everything you've learned, put it on the shelf, man. It's different. It's so different. And I'm going to tell you, the trap is this, is that and I'm not throwing any university under the bus or anything, but you just heard from these two that it's not the same game anymore. It's not. And the purpose and the calling is higher than ever. And if you don't have the juice, you can't get on the leadership ride. And I've been pondering this for quite some time. And so for me, this is what I've come to. As an organization, I'm going to go back to what Barbara said about communicating and everything else. We got to recommunicate me. I'm not talking about anybody else because this is my fault. We got to recommunicate what is the new definition of leadership for education. And then once we communicate, we got to recommunicate it to you all. So you guys are very clear on this is the new definition. And then I have to retrain everybody on those systems, my current principles, my future principles, those in the pipeline. If not, I'm asking for a disaster to happen, right? I'm just like hoping that everybody can just move along with the flow. And we know that the practitioners in us, we see it, right? But nobody's used to the politics and everything else. As much as universities try to teach you about that, it's very difficult to, work with. But now it's coming lower and lower levels, right? And principals are feeling it, teachers are feeling it. That could be a lot of reason why people are getting out of the profession. And so having a portrait, I'll call it, a portrait of leadership, and then saying these are the type of characteristics in my system that I want to paint, and these are the skills I want you to acquire. I gotta redo all of those within here, or else I'm going to be running into people with the traditional system of learning coming into this new system, and I'm going to have to train them anyway. And we're going to be running into issues. It's going to be like needless energy. So let's get in front of it. I think the most critical part that we've learned in all of this, and I'm going to go back to self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, whether it's family time, rejuvenating your soul, however it is, your spirit, you will run out of gas quickly. And I'm going to tell you, it's not as rewarding as it once was. And so that learning that life balance and being clear about those life balances with people, I'm going to say will take you far in life.
Thanks so much for that, Rick. There's a realities, right? The realities of the job. And I appreciate all three of you being so candid and just being honest with folks, because there's ways to work through it, but you have to know what you're walking into. Otherwise, all types of bad things happen if somebody doesn't know what they're headed into. So I appreciate the comments. We have questions coming in through the chat line and also had come in previously. So I'm going to call on my colleague, David, to ask some questions.
Sure. So any participants, feel free to add a question in the Q&A, but I think this connects pretty well with what Rick just said about how the job has changed. So the question is, how do you think the role and purpose of education maybe needs to change as we come out of the pandemic? So is the business or the work that happens in schools, does some of that need to change as well?
And we'll just open it up to whoever would like to go first, and second and third.
I have a thought on that, Paul and David, and let me say as well, as serious as the last comments were, I want participants to understand there is no work that is more rewarding. I still love the work. I'm passionate about it. I think I've heard superintendents use this term, fire in the gut. When you're still passionate and you feel that drive around it, there is nothing more rewarding. I want to make sure I put that in place. When it comes to how education is changing, we were headed down a trajectory that was changing education already. I think the pandemic perhaps escalated that pathway. And I think it can be used as a good thing. I mentioned flexible scheduling. We were trying to push in this direction. We have clear pathway to do it now, where high school students do not have to have the same seat time, 8 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning until 2:30, but they have flexible schedules where they can work during the middle of the day. They can have apprenticeships. They can be in and out of the school building on their digital devices for part of their coursework. All of that flexibility is something we were hoping for, but I think we can really accelerate that pathway now for our young people. It's a good thing that's come out of the pandemic. So I think we also have to be very honest about the workforce. So people working at home and that kind of flexibility in the work setting will impact our young people as they graduate. So we need to be preparing them for the digital world that they will live in, that they might quite frankly be working at home or working outside of normal atmospheres. And if we are frank with them, artificial intelligence and digital resources are going to continue to transform the workplace. Things that robots and computers can't do is what we need to make sure our children are strong in. Creativity and collaboration and problem solving and working through issues, and being able to have some of those soft skills in place will be critical for our young people as they enter a workforce that is going to be quite different than what it would have been even 5 years ago.
I want to talk about how things are going to change and how things are going to stay the same real quick. We saw all the innovate. We just heard about the innovations that are coming in. But I always want us to reflect back on a person that has inspired us, okay? It could be somebody we never knew. And we looked at them and we said to ourselves, my goodness, that person speaks to me, and for whatever reason. So we have that. Then we got the influencer. How many of us had a tap that said, maybe you should think of this. Maybe you should think of that. How many of us have like a person that made all the world to us because they made us feel significant? In our line of work, dealing with thousands of students, the worst thing to happen is to ignore a child, right? Or not even be there to let them know that they have brilliance to shine through. And so now, using with this artificial intelligence, I've been toying with this individual education idea where kids could find their brilliance and we would naturally tap into it and then surround themselves with people that are just like them, that are with the same interests, the same type of passion. And can you change paths? Absolutely. That's part of self-discovery. And as they emerge and they go from the elementary years into the secondary years, they're going to leave with something. It's going to be college credit hours. It's going to be some sort of certification. It may be to agree. It may be something else. But with this type of education, I envision and forecast that we could start using the technology to truly individualize instruction for students and make it personalized and purposeful and be able to reach more kids. And I will say that that's something that I'm looking at. There's a lot of access to people that say that's out there, but I think as technology matures and our calling and purpose matures, I'm really excited about the possibility of just getting to that inner genius of every person and then putting them in those environments where they can thrive. That's what I'm looking forward to the most.
I would add, in addition to some of those delivery models in terms of how we're going to change the trajectory or emerge out of this pandemic with education, the skill sets or how we deliver schedules for our students, and how we tap into a new workforce in a different way. I think we also have to acknowledge that in this pandemic, I've realized like we can do anything. Our students are amazing. Our teachers are dedicated. Our principals are leaders, and we can do anything, but we cannot do everything. And that is what has become so exhausting, is that we are attempting to do everything. You start to go through the list of, we've provided vaccination. We are doing quarantining. We're taking on some of the communication around the medical profession. We are looking to support mental health, which is absolutely critical and needed. We're out in the community, seeing if we can provide more resources beyond just the school day. So all of those things, I think there's a need to acknowledge all of those things that are happening. And then there's also a need to recognize that public education does play a significant role in our community. And we have to come to an understanding and agreement, like, this is what we have to move forward with as a community. This is what we have to do. And that also applies to working with your board and your district. There's so many things, as mentioned, they become distractions. And so how do you bring back a focus of this is what is most critical? Because if we don't do that, we are going to keep ourselves in the space of trying to do everything, and we're not going to have the staying power. We're not going to have the ability to produce those results. So that for me is more of a philosophical approach around what we need to do as we emerge out of this. And that also plays into a significant amount of politics, because what does that priority become? So it's a shared responsibility from not only the funding with the legislature, but the community and their engagement, and our responsibility to not be defensive and say, we've got this is ours. We have to be open to that with our students, with our parents, with our teachers and our unions that are working with us. So I think those are the things that I would say have to change for us to be able to come out a stronger educational organization.
As you mentioned, David has another question. I just wanted to, as technology has changed so much for the consumer and folks want things in real time, I want to know now what's expected of me later, and kids do as well, and access something that changed so much in the superintendency, where it's typically, and maybe it was a letter, an email, go by and visit the superintendent, maybe it was public forum at a board meeting. Now they'll DM you, you'll get a Twitter message, you'll get something on Facebook, you'll get something on Instagram, or it's a district-wide issue, but still comes to the superintendent. And these things are happening in real time, and just the way the consumer has changed in their communication approach is certainly then impacting schools and sort of response expectations, and just more expectations just increasing, it seems like. So David, Dr. DeMatthews.
Sure. So I think we have time for just one final question, and Annie Maselli's question, I think, is pretty relevant, since we're going to be meeting soon to share our research. So as members of the academic community, what research should we be conducting to better support you and the work of the superintendency as we, hopefully are moving out of the pandemic and the current conditions?
I never mind going first, so I'll just jump in one more time. And then that way I don't forget what I was going to say, actually, probably older than my co-panelists. So here's what I think. What would be most helpful, because we've sort of gone through an experiment, really. We don't know for sure everything, all of the fallout, if you will, from the pandemic. And so I think there is significant research to be done, but two areas in particular come to mind for me. One is around how significantly we exacerbated those achievement gaps and how much of that can we tie to digital learning and home instruction. Is it more so tied to the community at large, or is it tied to the actual models that we had in place for digital learning? Very curious about that. And secondly, around social emotional learning, I think it will be years to come, actually, David, before we know exactly how much trauma our children have suffered. Not just our children, our staff as well, but the trauma of social emotional impact because of the pandemic. I think there's a rich body to be cultivated and surveyed around those actual outcomes, so that we might, because I don't imagine this is the last time we're ever going to go through pandemic, so we might have some learnings. I'm interested in best practices that show the best results. If it comes to the gaps, if some districts actually did not show steep losses in learning, then we need to learn from that and distribute that learning as well. And then lastly, at a policy level, what needs to be done in state legislation, for example, to make sure we don't let go of the flexibility that we have around seat time and flexibility around learning models, learning at home versus learning at school, and breaking up the school day. I'd love to see some work around that as well.
Yeah, this is Ed. I would agree with the idea of not having a clear understanding of what the impact will be for many years. So my ask would be to do that longitudinal study. We know that there's an academic gap. We also know that the social, emotional, mental health, and social aspects of what has gone on in the pandemic would be helpful for me as an educator to understand just what that has meant over the years, again, studying that for a period of time. And I think just looking at also, we've forgotten many students started their first years of school in distance learning. Well, we had other students who missed those important transitions and events that have added to their development and growth academically and socially. So I think it would be interesting to take a look at that and really do a case study from different schools, different districts, to try and get a handle on that. Because so much has happened, it's hard to really distinguish between what has been the cause of that or what the impact will be.
Well, the beauty is you guys have, like, I'll be honest with you, job security. There's so much to discover, right? I mean, we just heard about social emotional learning. We heard about academic loss. We could learn about the long-term effects between math, reading. I mean, there's so many different things that we could learn about. I think one of the things that I personally would like to see a deep dive in is whenever we start assessing community expectations, right? I do feel all of us are educational experts, right? But what is it that the community feels that needs to change in schools? And what are some of the directions that they feel will benefit society as a whole? For instance, and I'm not being catty or anything, but here in Texas, extracurricular activities are huge, huge. And they drive a lot of our master scheduling, right? And so philosophically, when I speak to other people from other states, they don't have that. So they're like, how do you teach math and reading when the majority of your day really is co-curricular, extracurricular, and it's not really dealing with the core, right? The majority of the day is somewhere else. And so how do those schools that focus in the core areas compared to the school districts that are looking at, I guess I'll call it the entire child, right? And we're not dealing with social emotional issues, but just strictly through an academic comparison. Were there states that thrived, and what data are we using to show that thriving mechanism and what not? Were there states that focused their energies on secondary learning, like our district? We said we only have this much time with them. We were all in on all our efforts to ensure our kids graduate. Our graduation rate went up during COVID, almost to 95%. So how did that happen, right? During COVID, when neighboring districts were like calling all seniors, they're not even showing up to school. But I can't say we had the same success as some of our neighbors in the lower grades. So what was it that were actual levers that we can learn from each other, and then hopefully replicate those best practices? Because I'm a strong believer that the master schedule will determine a kid's success. The state requisites that they need to graduate will determine what expectations we really have as children leaving. And do our internal beliefs through policy need to change?
So as y'all mentioned, that context is so important and had so many different experiences, even within a school district, and they're just sort of meeting those needs and expectations. And something else that's come out is that, and I appreciate the comments, it's, we don't know the full effect yet. And what we've been asked in the past is just grace, because we don't know what's going to happen later. We know what's happening today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in the next month, and operational issues, but they're going to be, we know they're long-term lasting effects. And I appreciate each one of you lifting that up, because we can't forget that we don't know. And we've not experienced something like this before. So I want to thank all of our panelists. You have just given us so much to consider. You've given us so much information to learn about. I learned in this experience, and true to any great discussion, we have so many more questions, but we've run out of time. So, you know, as teachers, when you've sort of evoked more response and questions, you're doing it right. So you're just doing it right again. And thank you for sharing your day with us so that we learn from the best. So thank you to our panelists. I want to thank David also for the opportunity just to hang out with UCEA and learn about UCEA and the way we're preparing future school leaders. And now we're fortunate to have the executive director of UCEA, who also shared some words with us. And I want to thank her as well, because she has been such a strong leader, such a strong voice for public education and the world of academics as well. And that's with Dr. Monica Verne Jimenez.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'll just make a quick comment because I know we're out of time, and superintendents don't have a lot of time in their schedules. So again, on behalf of UCEA, our convention, of our executive committee, I want to thank all three of you for taking time and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us. I think this question, I'm going to be left with this idea of sort of the ripple effects of us not knowing, and as we prepare to accept these students into higher education, what do we need to be prepared for? In terms of their experiences and their understandings of education in school. It's been a fabulous conversation. For all of those listening, thank you for coming. This has been recorded, so make sure to tell your friends to come back and listen in, because it is a gem and a huge opportunity and just privilege to be in conversation and to learn from all of you. Paul, thanks so much for putting this together. I'm looking forward to seeing those of you who will be in Columbus next week, just a few more days. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in these virtual platforms in the next week. So thank you very much again, and enjoy the rest of your day.